Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Research Triangle PowerShell User Group. My name is Mike Kanakis, and my co-host here is Phil Bossman. I'd like to welcome you to another meeting. Tonight, we're going to be talking about a wonderful topic. We're going to be talking about building beautiful UIs with some cool new PowerShell tools that are available. And Phil, you know that I am a big fan of PowerShell Universal. Right? I've done presentations on it. I use it at my job. I think it's a fantastic way to put a UI on PowerShell code and give people an interface. And I love the tool. And Adam, the creator of that module, has done an outstanding job. But if you just need an interface or a GUI for one script, that's pretty much a little too much. And then when you get past that and you look at the other choices that are out there, there's some jacked up old interfaces that still exist for creating GUIs for PowerShell code. Have you seen this module, what we're going to be talking about tonight?
Well, to your exact point, PowerShell has been around a long time. So we are now at PowerShell 7 version. And what that really means is that it's been around a while. And so some of that old code, and even if you look for how to build some GUIs, and hey, you know what? I don't want to do this console thing, and I don't want to do all that kind of junk, and I want something better than that. And so they look, oh, I found this other module, and I can use WPF and all that kind of stuff. Well, that's not what the world is now, right? And so the new module WinUIShell is just phenomenal, using the existing newer tools, the new development tools, and it's super exciting. I ran through some demos, and it's super exciting just to see that who we're going to have present tonight, StevieCoaster, man, he can really take care of some stuff. Going to demo.
So before we bring in Stevie, we'll just give you the gist of what we're talking about tonight, which is essentially, a lot of people who are non-IT pros, they look at PowerShell and they see the command line and they get intimidated by that. And so a lot of people want to have a user interface. And this WinUIShell module that's available allows you to use these new modern interfaces that some of the newer OSs and design specs on the internet have introduced, like trusted glass interfaces that are, transparent and stuff like that, and make an easy interface for your PowerShell code. So before we go too much farther, let's bring in StevieCoaster. Hey, Stevie, say hello. How are you tonight?
Hi, I'm hoping. Yeah, I figured out backgrounds. Yes, it worked. All right. Cool.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Thanks for joining the show once again. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Better than I deserve, for sure.
Yeah, and so we want to say thank you to Stevie for putting together a demo on this in very short notice. Stevie's pretty amazing with what he does in a short amount of time. He's a longtime friend of our user group and has presented, I'm going to guess, maybe 20 times for the group at this point. Always does a fantastic job. So that's a little bit about you and your history. What are you talking about tonight?
So you've kind of alluded to it already, right? So we're going to take our scripts and we're going to elevate them to the next level. We're going to make them more user friendly. We're going to add some pretty UIs on top of them. I want to talk about a couple of other tools as well, just to kind of introduce us. There's a lot of new folks here, so I want to give everybody kind of lay of the land, right? Like, these are your options, but then we're going to focus in on one thing specifically that's brand new. Well, relatively brand new. It's not been out, but maybe a month or so, maybe a little bit longer than that. Now that I think about it, but it's really, really new compared to the other stuff. So, and it's really, really cool. It's super fun.
So let me ask you a question. For years, Phil and I have been running this user group, and at least 10 times a year, there's a question: how do I build a GUI for my PowerShell stuff? And the default answer for the last 5 years has been, hey, if you want to build a GUI, go get Sapien, the Sapien tool, because it has a really good interface for building a GUI front end. If you don't want to,
Outgrid View. Outgrid View's been, everybody.
Or use something like Outgrid View, but obviously that's just a canned thing, right? And if you don't want to do that, go the web route, like PowerShell Universal or something like that, right? But we always would say, if you have a 20-line script and you want to put a GUI on it, your script is going to be like 250 lines because of all the code that has to be written to produce a GUI in the old like .NET world, right? So with this module, which you're going to show, do you have to do you have to add on like 300% more code to your module to make a GUI?
It's not a ton. So, and we'll get into it and we'll see it. It is a little bit of a lift to put a
So
GUI
there's
on.
always a little bit because you
Yeah,
have to define the
of
GUI.
course, but it's not
right?
1,000 lines, right? It's a couple lines. But the nice thing is, and what I really want to kind of drive home with this thing is, you can really use WinUIShell as a framework to begin to build your own tooling around this thing. Like, to me, I really think that WinUIShell is begging for a DSL similar to something like Pester, to be able to declaratively define, similar to writing a Pester test, you would write a UI in the same kind of fashion, where you would say text box with some properties on it, or
Yeah.
a progress bar or ring with some properties on it, et cetera, et cetera. So when you UIShell, the module is a really, really good stepping stone as a framework, and that's where it exists today. So that's how we're going to use it. But I'm really hoping that by the end of this, you get a solid understanding of what you can do with it and how it works, so that maybe you can go off on your own and extend it with your own tooling. Maybe write some nice wrapper functions around it that you can use internally, maybe some internal modules that you want to write, or better yet, produce some stuff that you can produce onto the PowerShell gallery and share with the broader community as well. But WinUIShell will, by default, and as it stands now, give you the framework for building modern looking UIs as opposed to all the other tools. And we'll look at a couple of those.
Okay. And we're going to turn it over to you here in just a minute, but just to give everybody a quick update, this is July of 2025, and we're talking about a module that is relatively new and built by a prolific community member, MDGRS, who has created some really interesting tools over the last 2 or 3 years. And some of us have a connection to him through some back channels, and he's built this module that really allows you to build GUIs in a simplified manner, much less than what you've had to do in the past. And so I think that's the perfect transition to hand it over to you, Stevie, unless you have something else you want to give as an intro to set this up. But feel free to take it away, I think.
Awesome, awesome. So actually, the first thing that I want to do is take a slight tangent. I want to do a little segue to start off. So in August, in the middle of the country, in Kansas City, is a developer conference. It's called Kansas City Developer Conference, KCDC for short, and it bookends with DevOps Day, or a DevOps Days event. So they're kind of co-locating in the Kansas City Convention Center. It's in August. I think it's the 12th through the 15th. I think I can post the link here in the chat. But my company, Chocolatey, we're sponsoring this event, and as part of our sponsorship, we have the ability to offer you guys discounted tickets to the event if you want to go. So if you want to go, tickets are like $500 right now with early bird pricing. It's a really, really good conference. There's tons of good content if you're kind of developer-ish in your roles at work or developer adjacent. There's a lot of DevOps stuff. So if you do like even CI/CD type work, this conference is for you, right? So it's $500 on sale right now. It gets more expensive the closer to the event you get. But if you use the code Chocolatey10 at checkout, you'll be able to get 10% off your ticket price. We're really excited to go. It's quite a bit bigger than PowerShell Summit is. There's about 1,500 people that usually show up to this thing, so it's about 5 times the size of PowerShell Summit is. If you have been to PowerShell Summit in the past 2-3 years since we've come back from COVID. But yeah, well, we're going to be there. A ton of us from the Chocolatey team are going to hang out at a booth. We'll have swag, as we always do. It's not going to be t-shirts this time. It's going to be something way cooler. I'm not going to reveal any secrets. But yeah, if you're able to get to Kansas, if you're close to Kansas, and in August you've got some free time, come check out that conference. We're really, really excited about it. It's going to be a ton of fun. And I can put that code in here as well. So Chocolatey10 will get you again, 10% off your ticket price when you go to checkout. So all that said, that's my tangent. Now I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started. As long as I can share my screen. I hope you guys have made me a presenter.
You are a presenter, and I just want to say also, just from a user group perspective, is to get engaged in the community, participate in the community, participate in user groups, participate in conferences themselves, and engage. And I think that is one of the values of the community as a whole. And so even if you don't participate, YouTube has a bunch of great content. Really, right now, PowerShell.org has released their sessions recently, but also PowerShell ConfU just finished and their content is coming out. And so certainly watch those videos, watch those YouTube channels. And so if you're not already watching them and you're not as, like and subscribe, those are definitely some channels you want to like and subscribe to. So thanks a minute.
Yeah.
And like and subscribe to us too, but go from there. All right, Stevie.
Cool. Yeah. Just to reiterate your point, going to conferences is fun. Like, we get a ton of vacation time at Chocolatey, and I never use all of it because I go to a lot of conferences, and that's fun to me. Like, that feels like PTO to me, so I don't end up taking vacations, which makes the higher ups mad that I'm not using my time. But conferences really are a way to kind of check out from your day-to-day work, chill out a little bit, meet some new people, hang out, talk about stuff that you care about, get passionate about, learn some new stuff. They're super, super beneficial. So if you can get to them, it doesn't have to be this one. It doesn't have to be Summit. Like, those are great to go to, but yeah, get to conferences. They're super, super fun. So I'm going to go ahead and kick off, get started. Let's talk about some UIs for a while, right? So PowerShell UIs, nothing new. They've been around for quite a while, actually. And I want to show you a couple of options that have existed prior to this WinUIShell thing. Now, everything that I'm going to show you, and I'm going to kind of start with my favorite, then work my way back. PowerShell Universal, I think most everybody, if not everybody in here, has probably heard of this thing. Adam Driscoll created this web framework that makes really, really cool dashboards that are web-based, written purely in PowerShell. He created this thing several years ago as an open source thing, and it kind of took off on him, so he commercialized it, and that took off on him, so he quit what he was doing and started Iron Man Software to do this full time, and now PowerShell Universal has grown and grown and grown. So it's kind of morphed from this, hey, write some PowerShell, get this cool web-based dashboard thing that can do whatever the heck you can think of in PowerShell, to this platform that does PowerShell-based dashboard like apps that are written in pure PowerShell. You can write your own REST APIs in this thing and consume data, publish data, all the things that APIs can do. You can write your own APIs in this thing. There's a whole like automation script runner type job engine inside of this thing too. It's really, really cool if you're looking for like a web-based solution to common problems that you're solving at work, right? So PowerShell Universal, probably one of, if not my favorite all around PowerShell UI tools that exist today. Another one that has existed for a really long time that started again as an open source project. We're kind of noticing a theme here. Another one that started as an open source project is poshgui.com. This is a WPF designer that's in the web. It's morphed into a commercial product at this point. It used to be open source. There's not an open source version of this anymore. But this is your traditional like WinForms and WPF type thing, like the old style UIs that you're used to, right? They're not super pretty. They've been around forever. But this tool has also been around for quite a while now as well. So it's an option. Now, the one that's probably one of the most well-known ones, and actually Don Jones of PowerShell fame, he wrote Learn PowerShell in a Month of Lunches, a couple of different books. He's very, very prolific in the PowerShell community. He actually started the PowerShell Summit. He comes from Sapien. That was his day job while he was starting the PowerShell Summit after he started writing books and stuff. So it's been around for a really long time. It's a really, really good suite of tools. If you're looking for things that can help you write PowerShell-based GUIs and like help and things like that, there's a really, really nice suite of tools that Sapien provides. But again, they use WinForms. So it's kind of antiquated looking UIs at this point. It's not super, super pretty. But still a really, really good suite of tools if you're looking for that sort of thing that can help you write, your help and GUIs and scripts and things like that. And it's not terribly expensive. I think it's like $600 or something like that. So it's not bad, but it's a good one. But tonight we're going to talk about the newest thing to hit the market, or the community rather. It's because it's an open source tool. There's no market for it. We're going to talk about WinUIShell. Now, this MDGRS guy, the dude's brilliant, right? He's a game dev by day and a PowerShell wizard by night. He's written this thing that takes the Windows ADK, which is the modern app kind of development framework, and wrapped it up in PowerShell so that us as PowerShell developers have the ability to make these really, really nice UIs with really little effort. It doesn't take very much. So if you're unfamiliar with the Windows ADK, if you just open the settings app on your Windows 10 or newer machine, or I think even Windows 8.1 or newer machine, you get this thing, right? This is the Windows ADK. All the like controls and stuff that are on this window are part of the Windows ADK. Now, not everything that we see here is available as part of WinUIShell because, again, it's brand new and he's kind of iterating on it as he goes and adding controls as he goes. So there's a limited number of controls that we can use with this thing, but there's enough to make people like me dangerous, right? Like we can have some fun with this thing at this point. And as he iterates and creates more releases of this module, it's going to get better and better as he adds more controls, adds more functionality to those controls, et cetera, et cetera. So super, super awesome module. And we're going to dive into it. And Mike just turned on his camera, so he's going to say something.
Well,
What
so
you got?
I just want to be careful with the way that you're leading into this because I understand what you're saying and I agree with you, but I think for the casual viewer at home, they're hearing a story that sounds like this is bleeding edge tech that might be tough to deal with. I was going to ask you, how hard is this to get started with?
On a scale of 1 to 10, 4.
Okay, so with a little bit of work, this is accessible for regular people.
Yeah,
'Cause you need to have some PowerShell
absolutely.
knowledge. You need to know
Yeah.
your way to be able to find some data in that ADK. But it's not like you need to learn regex to be able to do something here,
No,
right?
no, no,
Right?
no, no.
Yeah.
This thing is super approachable, super approachable, and it's only going to get easier as well. I feel like,
So
especially as people like become familiar with it, and then again, if they treat this like a framework, and then we start to get community involvement, and we start to see community modules that kind of wrap this thing come out, it's going to get even better.
So where I can offer some value here, Mike, is it's the idea is that with most PowerShell stuff, it's a linear action. Hey, do this, go through a loop and loop kind of thing. With this is that hey, I can throw off onto this GUI thing and I can inject some stuff. And in the when you're working with UI, it's all about eventing. And so hey, when this event happened, do some work. When this happened, somebody click a button, well then do some work and then come back. And so that is a paradigm shift, and I think that's the only reason why you would go to a 4 versus like a 2, because it's all the same. Hey, generate a thing, but some of this eventing part is kind of, that's not completely linear in the form of like application flow. So that is the only place where I think you can like, oh, I gotta make a mind shift, but it's not something that's completely unbearable in far as the the leap to get somebody there. Just the know, hey, I'm in this other mode. So it is totally consumable, and you can definitely do it. And if you think you have imposter syndrome, you can definitely do it, and you should definitely get involved.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that, Phil. Appreciate it. So I'm going to open up VS Code and let me make sure that we can kind of see everything. So I'm going to blow this up a little bit. Is the size of the text okay for everybody? Do you want me to like light mode it? Is dark mode okay? Personally, I see better with dark mode. So if everybody's cool with dark mode, I'm going to roll with that. But if you guys prefer light mode for the recording and stuff, let me know. I'll switch it, and I can struggle.
The modes go just like 1 up or maybe 2 up. That's all.
All right, let's try that. Let's see what happens with it. I shouldn't have closed that terminal. Terminal, new terminal. Perfect. Let me just minimize this down here a little bit and close this. All right, so I'm going to start. Let's start at kind of the beginning, right? So let's look at something that we're used to seeing as PowerShell developers. So if we look at a script, for example, if we look at this old .NETWay.ps1, what this script does is it takes a certificate that maybe you've got laying around, converts it to a PFX file. So you've got a certificate and you've got the private key for that certificate, and you want to create a PFX file of that certificate pair or that certificate and key pair, right? Because that's all a PFX file is. It's a fancy zip file that includes a certificate and a private key. So what this script does is it uses .NET classes basically to convert those two items into a PFX file. So if we look at the script, we open the certificate or we load the certificate into this X509 variable. And again, we're going to use .NET classes to do this work as part of this script. So we're going to use this X509 certificate 2 class, and we're going to say new, and we're going to give it our cert, which comes from a parameter, which is just the path on disk, right? And then we're going to load the private key, and then we're going to create that PFX certificate with the private key. So this is the .NET way to like merge those two things together into the PX file itself. And then all this stuff here is what exports the PFX to a file that's got a password on it, right? So we don't need to dive into the nitty gritty details of what all is going on here, but that's how that works, right? So because of Windows, like the certutil.exe utility doesn't have a way to produce a PFX file for you, we have to use this .NET stuff to make it work. Now, if you're on Linux or you have the ability to use OpenSSL, we can kind of use the same kind of script, right? Only it gets a lot simpler. We can use OpenSSL and we just give it a command line. So we say, hey, here's our cert, here's our key, we want this PFX file, and then we want it to have this password, and we get our PFX file. So if you're on Linux or you have the ability to install OpenSSL, the command line itself is easier to write a script for. But if you don't have Linux or you can't install OpenSSL, you can still do it with .NET. So I wanted to really show you that we're going to take maybe a script that we've already got and turn it into a tool that maybe a non-technical user on your team can use, or maybe a more junior person can use, right? Maybe you've got somebody that isn't familiar with PowerShell, doesn't want to run a PowerShell command, doesn't want to learn how to do it. They just want to click something and make it happen, right? So let's convert these PowerShell scripts that we've written into tools that others can use. So we're going to do that with these two scripts. Now, what we're going to do, and I've only done one of them to kind of show this off. And what I'll do is I'll just run the OpenSSL one just as an example. So if we go to scripts and then we run the old OpenSSL way, we can give it a path. And let me do some opens. Yeah, that'll work. Oh, that's actually not going to work over here. Hold on. Let me go over here and grab it. off screen, and I'll get it for us. And bear with me while I can't type over here. What did I do? I've done something, and now my certificate is gone. Bear with me while I find it. Where is it? There we go. Where's my app data folder? Now, if I can remember where it stores the stuff. There we go. That would be in. Probably. Nope. We don't want that one.
Maybe we'll make a little note
There it
here
is.
for Kevin to clean this up.
Yeah, because I screwed up my. There we go.
Hey, that's a live demo, man. That happens.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with OpenSSL path. It's probably
Note to
being
Jake.
goofy
You
from
see how it
earlier.
goes?
So, anyways, yeah. See, you just got to roll with it, right? So we've got our certificate. I'm just going to copy the path here. I'm going to provide that to the scripts, old OpenSSL. Let's do the cert, and then we'll do the key as well. Where'd that go? It's hiding. There it is. Let's do the key as well. I'm going to put this over here so I don't have to move around so much. We'll do the PFX file. I'm going to put it in the ctemp. We'll just call it example.pfx. And then we'll give it a password, right? So this needs to be, so if we look at the script, this needs to be a secure string. So what I'm going to do is go like this. I'm going to say super cool password. Now convert to secure string as plain text force, and we're going to run that, and I'm going to get the thing. So if I do that and I open this folder up and we come over here to my temp directory, there's my PFX file, no smoke and mirrors, everything worked. And this is how you would traditionally do it as somebody who writes PowerShell scripts and wants to run PowerShell scripts and maybe like plugs this into automation or whatever. So what does that look like when we want to do it to a GUI or via a GUI? Well, that looks like something sort of like, let's go here and then let's do new simple SSL like this. And what that's going to do is it's going to open up this nice little PFX file maker thingy, right? I'm super creative with names in my tools, so I've called it this. So what we can do is the exact same thing. So what we'll do, since I've already ran this down here, I'm just going to copy this and paste this. I'm going to grab my key file and paste this here. And then I'm also going to paste in my PFX file. Again, I have deleted that. So let me just make sure I did delete that because I don't want a collision or anything like that. Let's go over. What the world? It's losing its mind. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Beautiful. Just to show you, no smoke and mirrors. That folder is empty, right? So there we go. And I need to give it a password. So I'm going to say super cool password. And you'll notice that my password field here is an actual password field. It masks the password like you would expect it to do. And then if you click reveal, it reveals the password as you would expect it to. And if I click this convert button, when we give it a second, we get a couple of things. So this time we get our PFX file, but we also get this attempt.log. And that's because I wanted to create a PowerShell transcript at the same time. That way, in case I had something go on that that produced an error, something weird or anything like that, I had a log of what went on. So just to show you kind of the stuff that you can do with these UIs to extend the functionality of them. I threw a little extra something into this. So what does this look like to actually make this PFX file maker thingy? Let's dive in and let's check that out. So I'll close this script or this UI, and then we will open this new simple OpenSSL.ps1 script. And fair warning, it does look fairly scary at first, right? But it's really not. We're going to take it really, really slow. I'm going to break it down, and then I'm going to kind of walk through and explain exactly what's going on here. So WinUIShell, because it wraps the Windows ADK, the first thing that we need to do when we write a PowerShell script that's going to leverage this thing is include a namespace. Now, I know that some of this stuff, particularly for those that might not use more advanced PowerShell, this might be a little bit foreign to us. But some of us that are more familiar with writing C# code, this is going to be super familiar, and we're like, yeah, it's a using statement. That's fine. So in newer versions of PowerShell, the using statement was introduced. So instead, so much like using a NuGet package inside of a C# project, or loading a .NET class inside of a C# project, rather, in a PowerShell script, you can use the same functionality. You can use that using statement. So what we are going to do is load the WinUIShell namespace that comes from the WinUIShell module. And what that's going to do once that module is loaded is give us access to all of the .NET classes that are part of the Windows ADK that the module has so far exposed. And once we have that stuff, these two lines here, we're ready to go. We can start creating our GUI application. And the first thing that we are going to need is a new application, right? We're making a new GUI app, so let's create one. And that's what we're going to do here. So the first thing that we're going to do is load a new application class context and load all the resources for that application, and that just gives us access to literally everything that this Windows ADK exposes currently. The next thing that we're going to do is we need, and actually, you know what? Let me.
Hey, Stevie, you got a question. You got a question.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
Alan, did you have a question you wanted to ask?
I had to unmute, sorry. Yeah, so I have a question about the very beginning, which is if you, and this is an error handling question, I guess. If you're using, using has to be the first non-commented line. So we can have requires module WinUIShell first.
Sure.
Right?
Sure. Yep.
But if you're using namespace WinUIShell and it doesn't exist, it'll fail. And if it does exist, you don't need to import the module because it found it already.
Correct. So technically, the only thing you need here is the using statement. Full transparency, I copied an example from the repository and deleted everything but the first two lines. That was because it's part of the examples. You don't actually need the import. That's correct.
Why you? It's always best to do the import if you need it, but the import can happen automatically with auto import.
Yeah.
It will auto import. That's why it happens. But if you don't want to kind of imply whether it happens, so if you're just distributing the code, you'd want to import it, and so you want to throw an importation, like an import error, as opposed to just find some random thing. You're like, where did that come from? So it will auto import if it exists in the system or if in the right places. There are a couple places where it can be, but to that point, the using namespace, it has to be available to it, and the import will import it. So that's what goes from there.
So, but let's say that we are distributing this app in our company and someone hasn't installed WinUIShell. If you do a requires, they get, this cryptic red text saying, we can't find this.
Correct.
Yeah.
And there's no way to, is there any way, here's the question I have, not just for this product, but if you have to use a namespace, all right, is there any way to catch that error and say, install PS resource WinUIShell?
So kind of what Stevie's doing there is, if not exist, I would stick that like up at line 1 and just like, hey,
You can't put that, but Phil, you can't put it at line 1 because using namespace has to be at line 1.
No,
and you can't even do. Yes, it does.
I don't think it needs to be there. It doesn't need to be the first
No,
line.
when using has to be the first line. Using
It has to be the
line.
first line.
Yeah, it has to be the first line. So what I would suggest, if you are doing this stuff in an environment where you don't have WinUIShell kind of installed everywhere, is either A, write a module, like an internal module that will do all those checks and balances for you, and then load the module and then load the UI as part of that, or make this script kind of two-part, right? So move all this stuff into a function inside of the script, and then have some boilerplate logic at the top to ensure that the module is installed and stuff like that, and then call the function that's inside of it, because you can put the using statement inside of the function. Everything's happy dory there, and then you just call the function at the end. So something like function foo, do this sort of thing, and it's just going to bark at me because it's super, super wrong as this. But let me do this and then come down here, and then if we call foo, that's going to be fine because this using is in the context or the scope of the function. So then we can come up here, and the very first thing we can do our check for module install if needed. Yeah, so we can do that. Now, my examples here assume that I already have the module installed, because I do, right? So if you don't, there absolutely would be some more work that you would need to do. But my suggestion would be to use a module that you write internally that does all the boilerplate kind of scaffolding for you, and then distribute that module where you're going to use the GUI application.
Okay, thank you. I was just kind of curious what the best way to handle this. I thank you for that explanation.
Sure. So one more question for you, Stevie. Alan kind of beat me to the punch here with the question. So you were getting started on this function here, and I was going to ask you, how good were you able to figure things out from the documentation that's in the module? Like, how did you figure out all these ADK pieces that you need to pull in?
Using the examples that are available in the module. Yeah.
So the module has.
So if we look at the module and we go to, if we scroll down in here, here's a quick start that gives you like a bare minimum. And this is kind of where I stole that important using thing. And you'll notice that actually the using is not on the first line here.
And it failed. That's what got me started.
Yeah, exactly. So, but there's some kind of limited examples here. But if you go and dig into the examples folder in the repository, there's a ton of different kinds of examples that you can immediately run. So if we look at like the install dialog, for example, it kind of walks you through what it does.
So I was just trying to get the point across that Stevie's not like some wizard who figured this all out on his own. You had a good starting point.
No. Yeah, I definitely took the examples and then bastardized them to make these demos. Yeah, for sure.
And that's what we'd recommend most people do. That's why the examples exist.
100%. Yeah, 100%. They give you a really good jumping off point. Like every single one of these things that you are going to write ever is going to have, well, probably not this line, this stuff, because that's stuff I just added. But this stuff is going to be at the top of every single one of these things that you write, because you need this resources variable for. Actually, I don't even think you need the resources variable itself. This is kind of akin to doing null equals, because loading this is going to like spit out some stuff. In this example, I'm not using resources, so I don't need the object that gets returned, but there are other examples that do use the resources. So it's just, it came along for the ride as I was copy and pasting out of different examples inside of here. So don't read too much into that. Just know that these first 8 lines are kind of what you need for every single GUI app that you're going to create. So I've got the application that I just showed running, so that as we walk through this, we can kind of see it as I explain it. So we've got our new application window, and this is the actual window itself. That's what's making this UI that's floating around the screen here. And actually, can I kill GreenShot, because that thing is going to absolutely, or Grammarly, because that little bubble is going to drive me nuts. So we've got the UI here. That is this window. And what we do is we set the backdrop to this mica thing. So that's what makes the window look the way it does. So this mica backdrop is strictly a style, and it follows your light and dark theme system preferences. So if I had Windows set to light theme, this app would be light theme. I like dark theme, so it's always set to dark theme. It's following my system preference, which is super cool. And then I also have my window set to extend the content into the title bar, which allows things to, you notice how there's no like line at the top. I wish I had like a regular WinForms app that I could show off real quick, but I don't. But actually, I can show you this. Let me come over here. Let's do documents, get user groups, Raleigh, WinUIShell talk. Let's do that, and then let's do complex one. I think that, yeah. So see the difference here, how this one has a title bar on it, and it says navigation view, and there's an icon, and then you've got your minimize, your all of those things. That's because in this UI, I don't have this extends content into title bar property set to true. So because I've got that set, I get this nice kind of modern flow to it. It looks a lot like the settings applet on Windows 11 or Windows 10 or whatever operating system you happen to use in that modern settings application. So that's what that looks like. And then the presenter, I took this directly from the documentation for the presenter.NET class. It's a picture-in-picture overlay. So basically, it's just an overlay that sits on top of the app that all of this stuff kind of sits in. So all of these text boxes that you see and all these labels and the buttons and everything, they're kind of sitting picture-in-picture in our window, basically. The upper third is where the icon and the title text sit. So we've got our kind of wrench thing here. That's our icon, and this is in there's a whole bunch of these things. So the symbol icon it's an enum that has a ton of different icons that you can load inside of here. One of them is Xbox One console. We'll see that later on. But I figured since we're doing some kind of thing a wrench made sense. I just kind of picked something, and then we actually start to add content to our windows. So this is kind of the first piece of content that we add to our window here to kind of make the look and feel what it is. So the first thing we do is we get our icon and we put it on our app, and that's that wrench. The next thing that we do is we set our title. So we text block for that, and then we give it our text, which is that PFX FileMaker thingy, and then we give it a style, right? So again, here's where we use our resources. Tile, text block, style, that's what makes the text kind of look the way it does. So a lot of that stuff comes out of that resources that we loaded at the very beginning. And then we start to provide the layout for things. So the title and the icon, these two things here are just the elements that are going to be part of the UI. They haven't landed on the UI yet. To actually place them on the UI, we're going to use a panel. And that's what we do here with this title panel variable. We create a stack panel, we give it an orientation, we kind of define its layout with its margins and its padding and all that stuff. And then we put the stuff onto the panel that we want to include. So for this particular panel, what I want is my icon and my title so that this stuff looks the way that it does here inside of this app. Does that, I see Phil. What's up,
No,
Phil?
I think this is some of the role in which me as a leader comes along and just says, okay, we're going to pause for a second and understand what's happening here. And so as you see, Stevie's come along here, and we talked just a few minutes ago about this, WinUI thing. It's this thing, and we're just creating these individual objects. And similar to what I said before, is that the elemental leap that we need to get to with PowerShell is that, hey, he's creating all these structures and nothing's being on the screen. And so at this point is exactly that point, is that he created this thing called a panel, and then he's putting things in the panel itself. And so it is this, hey, in the PowerShell world, I'm typically creating just a flow. Well, now I'm creating these ancillary objects that are external to me, and then eventually, hey, I'm going to construct this thing, and then we're going to get down later is just, hey, now we're going to make it visible, and then we can interface with them. So we're creating objects that we're going to effectively going to use later. And so we did that before. We created text boxes, we created buttons, and we created all these things, and then we're putting them onto a panel, and then eventually we'll put the panel on the display, and then display. And so that is kind of where Stevie's getting to, but that is one of these mind shifts that is different than typical in a normal PowerShell flow, hey, run a script kind of thing. So go, Stevie.
Yeah. And you kind of hit the nail on the head, right? We're more or less painting a picture right now, right? So we've got all these different colors that we want to apply to this canvas in a specific shape. So we've got our panel, which is our shape, and then we've got our title and our icon, which are our colors right now. And we want to apply our colors in a specific order onto our panel. So that's where when we add our children, we add them in the order that I've got them here, in that I want my icon to be first, and then I want my title to be after that. Otherwise, I would have my title text, my PFX FileMaker thingy, and then I would have my icon following it. So the order of operations there, what order do you want stuff to show up or flow onto your canvas that you're painting? That's kind of what we're doing with this panel here. And then again, how much space around things do I want? So with this panel, I've got a margin of, top, bottom, left, right, of how many pixels of space around these things that I want. I don't actually remember or know what the order is here in terms of, is this top, bottom, left, right, or is this left, right, top, bottom, or what it is. basically what I do is I play with the numbers until I'm happy with it, and then I leave it there, right? But like that's just it's how it freaking works. You just poke it until you get
My
it
understanding
right.
is it's top, right, bottom, left. It's
Okay, there you go.
it's a compass. I just see it as a compass as far as that's how
There
I
you go.
memorize my head.
Perfect. Yeah. And I am sure that if you look up the Windows ADK thickness .NET class, it's in the documentation what the order of things are that you can apply here or apply there. So now that we've got this first panel created, so we've created the first section of our painting. Now we're going to do the second section of our painting, which is the form itself. So the very first thing that we want to put on our canvas or in our panel is a text box to accept these .cer or .cert file that we want to use to convert to a PFX. So again, we create a txt cert variable to hold our text box object, and then we just decorate the object. So we give it a header, which is the text that it shows up kind of like the label would be in a Win form. And then our placeholder text is what shows up inside of the text box where you actually type any information. So here for our certificate, we say, hey, we expect a certificate file of .cer/crt, and then our placeholder text, we kind of just reiterate the point of .cer or .cert accepted. And we just move on down the list, right? We know based on our script that we're trying to wrap that we need a certificate, we need a key, so we need another text box. This one's going to be for a key. We need the header to indicate that it's the key file, and we need the placeholder text to identify that it's, a .key file is accepted. And then again, we kind of want to work on our spacing, so we set the margins for things. So I want to make sure that there's about 24 pixels from the bottom of the previous text box to the top of the next text box, and it starts the header. So if you don't have a header, you'll have more. It'll look like you have more space here because the header property is going to be null, but it still exists on the object. So if you don't use headers, you might want to make that thickness there, that 24 value that you see here. Maybe you want to make that less, maybe 16.8, whatever, to kind of squish things together. But I think headers make a lot of sense, and I think placeholders make a lot of sense. So that's how that works. Now, the only difference in this particular form, you'll notice that the certificate file, the key file, and the PFX file, those are all just text boxes, right? They've got headers that identify the label, and then they've got placeholder text, which disappears once you start typing. Then we come down here to this password. The Windows ADK provides for a password box type, which gives you what you would expect a password type input to do, and that is I don't want to actually see what my password is as I type it, right? So it's not a traditional text box, it's a special text box that kind of protects the secret that you're typing into it, right? So in this case, it's a password, and then it provides a functionality to reveal that thing as you type if you need to, and then it masks it again. The nice thing is this thing comes through supposedly as a secure string. Now you'll notice later that I kind of struggled to get the secure string aspect of it to work, so I cheated a little bit, and we'll dive into that here in a minute. But the next thing that we do, and you can't really see it on this UI because things happen so fast, and I didn't code for it. But there's a progress ring that basically it just spins a circle until everything's done, and then it goes away. But again, this thing, it runs so fast, and I didn't code like a sleep into it or anything like that to actually let it show off. So you'll never actually see, except maybe super, super briefly, the spinny circle on this UI as it runs. But that is a thing that can happen. And then again, we want a status text box. That's going to show up down here. It's hidden by default. And it's hidden only because I don't have any text defined on it. So I've got, it's here. It's actually sitting right about here currently, but it's empty, so you can't see it. And then we actually define our button. So again, here's our convert button. We've got our button. We kind of place it on our app where we want to have it. So we've got our horizontal alignment to the right. That means it's over here. If it was to the left, it'd be over here, et cetera, et cetera. That's pretty self-explanatory. And then the content of the button, or rather what the button says, is convert. So that's what we see here. And again, we can style the button based on this resources thing with the accent button style, and that gives us this nice blue button with black text inside of it. And then we have to have a click event. What do we want to happen when this button gets clicked, right? So what we do is the very first thing is say if script is press to closes the window. And this is kind of a poor man's way to make the button say close after you've converted the PFX or converted your certificate to a PFX. So if I fill all this out and then I click convert, the text will change down here, or rather the kind of the last thing that happens is we set this press to close variable to true, and then we enable the button again. And the first things that we do when we press the button is check to see if that press to close variable is true. And then we also disable the button. So as we go down through this, what we do is after the conversion process happens, we change the text of the button to close and set this thing to true, so that once it's all done and it kind of like resets or like kind of know it's done, the button says close. So you instinctively click close, and then based on that variable mal being true, we just close the window, which is let's exit our app. It's the same kind of thing as doing like me.close or form1.close if you're doing a WinForms type GUI app in another tool or something like that. So that's where we are right now. We've defined all of the UI elements for our GUI, and then again, we have another panel to kind of apply all of those text box, password, button elements to here, and then to actually show the entire app itself, we set the content of the window to that panel. And again, we have a panel, which is the entire app here. We add our title panel to it. So we've got a panel nested within a panel, and then we add the rest of our stuff to it, so that when we set the content of the window, we just have this one panel to deal with here. And then we activate the window that displays the app. And then this is a blocking call. Basically, when the GUI application is open, you don't have access to your terminal. That's not needed. You can comment that out, and then you can use your GUI kind of separately. I don't really recommend that though.
So this is where I want to come in again and kind of talk about before, is that what we're doing in normal PowerShell is that nope, leave where you are. It's perfect. So back down to where you were is that, hey, so we finally defined this other panel. We built one panel, then we build another panel, and then we set the content to the window of the panel. Then we activate so that we make it visible, and then we just wait for somebody to do something, right? So that's the wait for the close. Yep. So at this point, we did a bunch of scaffolding to create this object behind the scenes, create a window, but not actually show anything, and then activate it. So that's what we're happening here. But then if the other point is just, okay, so just kind of pause, that's what's happening here. right? So everything,
Yep.
all of that work I did, it just goes really, really fast and then stops at 121 and just waits there until you actually click a button. It waits for the window to close. And so that's what you meant by that blocking call. So if you're not familiar with some of that like CS or computer science is showing, it's a blocking call. It will block and hold, and it's a modal window or some other functions that you probably heard before, is it will sit there and wait at 121. Now there is other calls that you can put to sit to say and keep on going and go forward and then let that window go, but then you have to figure out, hey, go talk to that window and do some other stuff, that's kind of thing. But then what I also want to come back to is a little bit above where you were talking about before is if you haven't seen, and you're doing a great job, Stevie, so I want to just make sure people see, is it add click? And that's where I went to that idea of inside of PowerShell, it's a linear form. But at this point, you can say, hey, this is the function you're going to call when somebody clicks something. So it's kind of like, hey, if when that event is the click event, go and do that code over there, and if it then come back and do your thing, but just go do that click whenever it happens, right? So you can define whatever the heck you want. You can make that just one little line that says, go do this function. That's also possible at this point. But as he was saying, hey, wait and check the buttons, and as you kind of see, hey, you have the ability to use script variables. You have the ability to use the buttons you defined previously. You can check their state. You can change their state. You can do a bunch of stuff. All of that stuff, you can modify the window all inside those click events or any other type of events that are available to you. And so it is a mind shift. So that's why I certainly agree with Stevie, is that using WinUIShell is like a number 4. It's not like a 2. It's a 4 because you have to have some fundamentals, but you also have to make that bridge that gap to get into this idea of UI programming and event programming and in that kind of thing. It's not linear, right? You got to break yourself from this linear mode, but you can definitely do it. And Stevie's doing a great job. So I just wanted to kind of bring everybody back to this idea of what can be possible and how to use it effectively. If there's a bunch of scaffolding to try and get some UI things, put some windows in different places, and then ultimately it's just sitting there at 121 waiting for you to do some work and then waiting off on the side. But then also is that inside, and when it's waiting there, it can kick off some other stuff and even come back and loop and do some other stuff. It's all sitting in that other thing. So you can do the, hey, click event, click it 3 times, click 4 times, doesn't really matter. It's still sitting. Your PowerShell window's just sitting there at 121 at the very bottom. It's just waiting there for it to come back. All that other stuff can happen separate from it. So good to go.
Cool. All right. So now that we've got the UI defined, right? Let's talk about making the button actually do something, and that is done up here in the add click method. So this object has properties which we're setting here with our horizontal alignment, right? And our content, the text that we want to show on the button is convert. And then it also has methods, which if we're PowerShell developers, we do this PowerShell thing every once in a while. We're kind of familiar with that, right? So a PowerShell object can have both properties that are note properties, which are things like the content, that word convert showing up on the button, and they also can have script properties, which are things that can run code, right? Or things that accept parameters in the case of methods. So this add click method accepts a script block, which is basically, it's a script block of code that the button is going to execute. And that's where we get this logic for, are we going to close the window, or are we going to do something else with that first blocking logic there? We set up our progress ring, which again, we can't really see here because this thing runs so fast. But what we do is we turn our progress ring on, and then we disable that button, because when things are happening here, we don't want people to be able to click the button more than one time, because that might cause weird, stupid stuff to happen, right? So once they click the button, we don't want them to be able to click the button again until such time as we deem it safe to do so. So we can disable that button. The next thing that we need to do is do the actual conversion itself. And that's no different than what we've done here. Now it looks a little different in here because I kind of was messing with stuff, but we can delete this line of code here. And it's exactly the same code that we're going to run from our old way of doing things, our PowerShell way of doing things, where we just execute a PS1 file, but we just kind of change the variable names, right? So, and I'm doing some fancy stuff in here because I've been doing PowerShell for a while, and I'm kind of set in my ways, and I like doing things specific ways, but you don't absolutely have to do things the way that I'm doing here at all. So what I've done is I'm using what I find to be the safest way to run a native command with arguments inside of PowerShell, and that I have an array of arguments that I'm going to pass to the native command, in this case OpenSSL.exe. And then I'm defining all the various values for the parameters, right? So the very first thing that we're going to pass to OpenSSL is the PKCS12 parameter. We're going to give it the export parameter to say, hey, we're going to export something. We want to provide the inputs that we need. So that in file thing here that we're using this -in for is going to be the value of this certificate text box. And I'm using a string formatter here because I like them, right? You don't have to do it this advanced. I like them. What I have noticed is that when you're using GUI forms and you like have a path or something like that, it doesn't, but at least this tool doesn't like having the quotes around the values. So if we were to go and say copy the cert file again, and I'm just going to Control-Shift-C to copy his path and then paste this in here, it doesn't actually like having these double quotes around it. It really wants it to have no quotes around it. Ask me why, and I'll tell you I have no freaking idea. I don't know what the hell's going on with that. So what I've done is I've just said, hey, if it's got double quotes, strip them off. That's why I'm doing it the way I'm doing it here, so that I can say, hey, take this and strip those quotes off. And I'm doing it for every input. So I'm saying, hey, the cert, let's strip those quotes. For the key, let's strip the quotes. For the PFX file, let's strip the quotes, et cetera, et cetera. And then this is where I start monkeying with that password. So I said earlier I was struggling with this being a secure string. It was being kind of a pain in the butt for me because the password itself on OpenSSL is just a string. It's not a secure string. So what I've done is I've used a network credential object, which accepts null as the username, whereas a PS credential object doesn't. You have to use something. So I use a network credential object here, and then I just pass in that password as a secure string here. And then because I've used a, let me go back over here. Because I've used a network credential object, I can access the password property as plain text off of that if I kind of unroll it. So that's why it looks really freaking weird because of the way I've had to escape things and use this up expression and all that stuff here. But just know that all I've done is I've used a network credential object to grab the secure string password and then spit out the plain text representation of that secure string so that the password parameter of the OpenSSL utility is happy. That's all that this does. It looks like bullshit, but that's what it is, right? It's sometimes you have to write ugly code to make things work. So once we have all the things that we're going to pass to OpenSSL done, then we actually use a try catch to actually do the work, right? So we start a transcript. That's what creates that log file. We start OpenSSL, or we launch OpenSSL with those arguments, and then we update our status and we say done. We stop our transcript. Bob's your uncle. If we get an error, then our text becomes the text of the error, and we stop our transcript and we turn our button back on. We say close. Everything's happy. So that's a simple app, or as kind of as simple as you can make it inside of WinUIShell.
I think one of the values here, I'm going to come back in and interject here, and Steve, you do an awesome job, is the idea is like just full stop, is that I probably would have taken some of this code and just that section, that function, and just stuck it out somewhere else so I could manage it instead of sticking inside of click.
Sure.
Click.
Yeah.
Just to that point, and just for simplicity, it puts here is that if I had to go back to put it there, but ultimately all of this work is a bunch of stuff. And to Mike's point, is like, hey, you could do this in 15 lines of code when we first originally started. No, this was 121 lines of code to get me this nice UI in a form that we can do with a bunch of padding and a bunch of other stuff, is to do like 3 lines of code. Now, some people may say, hey, that's a lot of work just for 3 lines of code, but this is a consumable product that it looks beautiful there on the left, is that, hey, I can put this here. You can do some parameter validation. You can do all of that separate, and it is all completely seamless to it. And so that's what the value brings, is that I can use some of, as Stevie was saying, this .NET classes and all that kind of stuff to get all those extra structure for me, and I can use it for free, and then eventually just run this little function that just doesn't work. So I'm using all of these other lines on basically like probably 40 lines of code to get my user information from me. Hey, I want to make this UI for them so that they'll input some data, and then effectively I want to just use some of that data and do some work. Now, in Stevie's example, he's just running 2 lines of code, creates a string and calling OpenSSL, doing nothing more than that. So it's actually 2 lines of code to do all of it. Everything else is just some scaffolding to get you there. And so it sounds like it's a lot, but it is readable. Why? It's fairly straightforward to read, but it will just make your life a lot more simpler to kind of put that there. And you can do a bunch of validation. You can get a lot of extra features with that baggage. Some people say, hey, it's baggage, but it's features more of that in that fashion. So still, good job.
Yeah, and just to show you kind of what this could look like, right? So we've got resources, and then we can do style inside of here, and then this can become text, right? So we have that. So instead of doing this, this becomes title equals new WinUI text box, text, some text, and then we can do style, and then whatever that style title text box style, right? So again, I mentioned that WinUIShell is a framework that you can use. You can really start to develop your own kind of wrapper functions to make the lines of code less, right? So for that title thing, I just turned 3 lines into 1. Like if you had a helper function for defining the panel, for example, you could have a spacing parameter, you could have a margin parameter, you could have, a children parameter that accepts an array that you can put all your stuff in, and then you just kind of do this stuff in the guts of the function that you write. Then all of a sudden, you've got this function that looks like new WinUI panel, right? And then you can do all this stuff. So I've kind of showed you hard mode in building this UI stuff, but hopefully it gives you some ideas to take back to work tomorrow, next week, next month, to kind of explore and play with and start to write those helper functions on your own. And once you start playing with this WinUI shell stuff, all of this .NET stuff that we're doing here, this is applicable to any other .NET class that exists. So other areas of the .NET ecosystem that you want to use inside of your PowerShell code, it's the same freaking syntax. If you want to create a new variable that is a new instance of a .NET class, it's this. It's whatever that .NET class is with the new accessor, right? Like that's just how PowerShell works. So if you take the time to learn this WinUI shell stuff to make these GUIs, you're going to be able to extend that knowledge to other areas of your PowerShell journey to make even better UIs, even more powerful scripts, etc. Like there's a lot of the .NET stuff that exists in PowerShell, but there's a lot of .NET stuff that PowerShell doesn't have a native commandlet for either. And the only way to do it is to access the .NET classes directly. Now, this is one way to do it. If you're kind of just starting your PowerShell journey, you're probably more familiar with the new object syntax, which you can do the same thing. So this window thing, and actually these are probably, I don't know the base class for these. Can I find the base class for these?
Well, because you use the namespace, it's actually new window.
Actually, yeah, there it is.
WinUI.
Yeah, it's WinUIShell dot application.
So you can see win equals.
Yeah, it would be new object, WinUIShell dot application, like that, right? So this would be like this, resources equals, right? So if you're new to PowerShell, you're probably used to seeing this. If you're familiar with PowerShell, you've been writing for PowerShell for a while, you probably see this syntax here. It does the exact same thing. The reason that I prefer this way is strictly for performance reasons. It's no faster in this context, right? Like I don't give a crap if it runs 30 milliseconds faster by going directly to the .NET class instead of having the overhead of having to load the new object commandlet and then load the .NET class as part of running that commandlet. But if you're dealing with millions of records or billions of records or a large data set and you need to use a .NET class to access it, using new object to do that should be considerably slower than calling the .NET class with your data set directly. It's just a performance thing, right? So, and this is a little bit more approachable to a newcomer because it's that verb noun context or that verb noun syntax that you're used to with everything else. But as you get more advanced with your PowerShell journey, you'll start to see more of this syntax here, which again, WinUIShell uses this syntax, but kind of lays the groundwork for you to write your own functions, to do your own things, to write your own UIs and things like that. I've been talking for a really long time. I'm probably boring people to absolute tears. There might be some questions. There might be some people going like, would you shut up already? So
I think you did a great job. I think you did a great job there, Stevie. I think really one of the things that you pointed out is the fact that, hey, it all rides on top of .NET at this point. And hey, WinUI brings out the WinUI .NET classes. And so that's where, we had some kind of discussion as far as the using namespace and a bunch of other stuff. But ultimately, it just rides on top of the whole thing. But one of the points that I brought up was the idea of, hey, making it a function. So in the PowerShell world is that, hey, we try to make everything modular, make it functions and create functions for this and functions for that, and even modules and other pieces for that. And so I think of it as, hey, we create one thing which is the UI thing. Then we create effectively, we should be creating effectively, hey, a different function for every single independent action that we want to take. Be it click this button, do this work. Do this function, do that work. Do this. And so make them discrete functions that do just the work. And then it kind of keeps things in a manageable component. If you click this button, it's going to do these 5 lines of code. Now, granted, you're going to be, in Stevie's code, is like, hey, I want to disable that button over there in the other place because the UI needs to change. Or the reverse, hey, when you click this button, I now want to go check that database and then change the status of this. I want to then refresh the text box, or I want to do that. Those are separate kind of functions, but we think of them as separate functions, separate actions, and so that they do different things. It's like Kenny with here, it's kind of doing this progress bar, moving back and forth when it's waiting for some action to take in page. I'm going to set that value. I'm going to freeze some action, do some work, but make those discrete functions so that, hey, one function is designing the UI element, one function is doing some work, one function is doing some modifying some other stuff, and then another one's just waiting there for user input, right? And so if you kind of think in those modes, is that I think it's an easier shift to get typical PowerShell developers who are in a linear mode. Okay, I'm just going to do some function and go back and forth. And so this is breaking from that module a little bit, but it is completely attainable to reach that work of, hey, do some work and actually call that out. And this asynchronous, go get some API call or something like that. Wait for the API to call. Well, similar. I'm going to click this button and wait for the click to come back. So, Great job there, Stevie. And I think people have any questions, reach out. Good job,
Stevie. Phil got tired. I got jealous of you talking so much. He wanted to top you there. I had to stop him. What I was going to say 7 minutes ago was I think there's a sort of a middle area that you guys sort of left untouched, which relates to more like guys like me who have like a traditional like sysadmin role and write simpler scripts with just some simple inputs and stuff like that. What I saw what you did tonight, Stevie, was you built an input form for a function with 100 lines of code, which if I wanted to make some tools for teams that were doing input and they don't want to deal with the console and they wanted to have an input form, you can make a pretty cool looking input form that matches the desktop OS without having to break out crazy amount of tools to build a GUI and not having to add on 700 lines of code to build a UI. It wasn't too bad. It's approachable.
Yeah. To what even Kevin Marquette said in the cast is that you write your script, you have this, and then hey, you can then bolt on with just scaffolding effectively what Stevie wrote is I'm going to add 500 lines of code, and then in my comment is add 500 lines in a separate function that is just the GUI front end to that function, right? That is that script that I ran back here, but it's just a front end to give me some input, right? But if we keep them separate, I can manage them separate too. Here, I'm trying to do it in the screen there. Keep them separate. This is my UI form, but I could just as well input all of that stuff at the console. But I could use my UI to give me my input too. And so that's similar to what I do right now when I'm developing internally is that, hey, kind of there's a UI to call some other function that I have default parameters for and that kind of stuff. So you could call it from the console, but hey, there's a UI that will, click those buttons for me if I want. But effectively, I just call from the console because I understand it. But if somebody needs a button to click, well, okay, here's a button that just runs my function underneath the hood.
Yeah. Because I work for Chocolatey and I'm wearing a Chocolatey hat, I am going to plug the fact that inside of a chocolatey package, you can do install chocolatey PowerShell command, which takes your PS1 script and shims it into an executable and then puts it on your path. So if you've got this GUI tool that it's a PowerShell script, you can create a chocolatey package out of it, deploy that to your application or to your endpoints, and then you could open up your terminal window. And then for this example, it doesn't work here because I haven't actually done this, but you could have something that's like new cert, right? And that would pop up this GUI and it would just magically work. And then you can use other helper functions for like adding a start menu item for it, desktop shortcuts, all that stuff. So if you want to write PowerShell GUIs and have a way to distribute them that are easy for people to use, that they don't need to use PowerShell at all, they can just run an executable file, you can glue some chocolatey to it on the backside, and then you've got kind of an end-to-end solution to make it work. But there, I've earned my mortgage payment. I'm done plugging chocolatey. Thank you. Goodbye.
It's about knowing your audience, right? Maybe for most of us, we wouldn't build the GUI because we're comfortable with the command line. There's just a certain amount of people that are in a GUI all day, and you introduce a command line, and they just simply don't know what to do. And so putting a window in front of them with an input box or returns data in a pleasant form, it just makes it more approachable for them. So you find your use case.
Yeah, literally to that point is that, you kind of saw, if you kind of abstract away from what we did, is that, hey, Stevie did all this work, 120 lines of code, and effectively ran an OpenSSL in some parameter. Well, you could just as well take the function that you would expect the user to type on the command line and just stick that in that one line where it says OpenSSL. And so I'm going to pre-can all of this up. So I never run all of this other 120 lines of code. I just run the command at line, whatever that line, 104, right? I just run that line and it gives me the same effect. But they want to run all that other stuff. And so it comes along with it. And so that's the magic. And I can keep that set of code separate for them, and then I can manage this other stuff. I can do that. I can have another set of people consume it at the module level of the commands that we want to run locally. And so it just works to that point, and we can separate them. So it's awesome.
So Kevin's got a question. Hey, go for it, Kevin.
Well, I just want to add that one of my favorite GUIs anymore is whatever ticketing system your org uses. So if you guys use a lot of Jira, it takes nothing to have a scheduled task every 5 minutes checking a specific, topic or thread for new Jira tickets, pull the contents of the fields, and send that to your script. So build your scripts as standalone tools. That way you could feed it from Jira or an email or your GUI. Like let the script be its own tool for automation that doesn't require somebody to be there.
Good point.
100%.
Yeah, and it is that literally that everything in PowerShell you want to try and think of as module. And so as Kevin just said, is that Jira is the input module for that data. Hey, Stevie built a GUI as an input module for the module. But me, I'm just leave it right there on the console, and I'm just going to do my input right from the console. And so effectively, I can take input from 3 different separate places, from Jira, from the GUI, from even another ticketing system, or the reverse is my function is going to dump out to the GUI, dump to where it just all becomes module and it's all interchangeable. So it's magic.
All right. So Stevie, do you have anything you want to wrap up with, or are you good?
I am good. Yeah.
So first off, we got to say thank you to Stevie for putting this together on short notice, doing another fantastic job, getting a topic that seems probably pretty tough and making it approachable to people. So thank you so much for doing that, man. Awesome job tonight. This is an idea starter, right? You can take what he did and try to emulate it exactly, but you should be seeing ideas here that want you to kick off some things on your own and hopefully do some research, check out the module, explore some more. So thank you for that, Stevie. We're going to wrap it up here after a nice, good long demo here. Again, thank you to Stevie and thank you to Phil and all the people who came and attended tonight. If you've made this long into the video, don't forget to check out the rest of the videos on our channel. We've got about 150 videos of stuff that we've already talked about in the past. So why don't you go check out some of those. And last but not least, if you liked what you saw tonight, come and join us live. Find us on meetup.com. You can look for RTP SUG, or you can go to rtpsug.com and get some information there on when our next meeting is. It's the third Wednesday of the month. We'd love to have you join. The benefit of joining is you get to ask the questions of the speakers. And so come and join us at the next meeting. Until then, we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us tonight. Have a great time, everyone.